Hello, my name is Matthew Félix, and I had the pleasure and privilege of editing the Bonnet Book, which we're about to talk about today with its author, Nancy Hardesty. Welcome, Nancy.
Hello.
So can you tell us a little bit about the book?
This is a story of a young girl in Illinois. She is torn from her family, sent to St. Louis on the orphan train, and has a very rough beginning. She becomes a nursemaid for two girls, educates herself, and pretty quickly 10 years passes. Then she becomes a hat maker.
Okay. And who do you think the book appeals to?
I think this would be a wonderful book for young adult women. Young Blanche grabs a hold of her intentions, educates herself, learns to be a hat maker, finds a career that is helpful to her community, loves every step of the transformation, and is a wonderful example for young women today.
So what led you to write the Bonnet Book?
I was taking an adult education night school course at Stanford University. I was asked to write an essay about a relative in my family, and I chose to write about my grandmother. As I put the words on paper, she suddenly came to life under my pen, and I felt her emotions and her fears, and I just decided I had to continue writing her story.
And I think a fair amount of that story actually takes place in Oklahoma. So can you tell us about the importance of Oklahoma to the story?
Yes, indeed. So as soon as Blanche becomes a hat maker, she has her training in St. Louis, then she is sent to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is about to have a state fair in October of 1910, and they put out a call for hat makers. So Blanche rides a train down to Oklahoma. She begins making hats for ranch women in the country and for the city women who will be sitting in the grandstands. And she's making many, many hats and having many adventures in Oklahoma. Frankly, it's about the second half of the book.
Yes, and she does indeed have many adventures in Oklahoma. Hat making is a big part of it, but there's also a lot more going on there. But of course, the readers will have to find those parts out. But I'm curious, did you actually go to Oklahoma to do the research, or did you just kind of imagine?
Oh no, I went to Oklahoma 3 different times. The first time I went to Muskogee. I went to the Muskogee Public Library, and I worked with researchers Nancy Calhoun and Nancy Lassiter. And I'm forever grateful to them for the pictures and the wonderful information that they helped me dig out of the files. I went 2 times to Oklahoma City to the Historical Society to do research. I had wonderful people helping me there, and I also traveled around in the countryside during a fierce storm, and I saw the creeks run red.
Yes, and I believe the creeks run red in the story itself, so that obviously made a big impression. But you just mentioned history and research, and one of the big components of the book, something that's really important, is the Orphan Train Movement. Now, I hadn't even heard of the Orphan Train Movement, but it turns out it's a really important part of United States history. So can you tell us just briefly, because I know there's so much history there, but can you tell us briefly what the Orphan Train Movement was and why it matters to your book?
All right. The Orphan Train Movement was from 1859 to 1929. 2 groups were involved in this movement. One was the Methodist Church under a minister named Charles Loring Brace, and additionally the Catholic nuns and the Foundling Hospital were involved. They both wanted to get orphans off the streets and bring them out as far as the Mississippi River to enable them to have a more healthy life in a small town or on a farm. Many of the orphans came from New York, but my grandmother actually came from southern Illinois to St. Louis on a secondary orphan train.
There's so much history there, like I said. It was just fascinating to learn about that, and I was really surprised that I had never heard of that before. Another theme, though, another important component of the book, I mean, you're wearing a hat. You mentioned that your protagonist learns to make hats. Can you tell us a little bit more about hat making and its place in the story?
Yes, I can. So this is the kind of hat that my grandmother would be making. These hats were made out of felt. So this is a white felt hat. You can see it's white on the outside and also on the inside. So the artistry that Blanche learned was to put on this one, there's a blue fabric and a lace over that, and silk flowers and feathers here and a tulle bow on the back. Now this is called a French riding hat, and this style of hat would have been used in the Oklahoma State Fair. So Blanche was making many hats in Oklahoma, and she dearly loved doing this for her fellow women.
What about the title, The Bonnet Book? Can you explain that?
So this is the 118-year-old book. I found this book when I was researching my grandmother's estate. You can see there are hats on the pages here, and there are notes about the hat making. Additionally, there are lists in here for her trunk, which she carried when she was hat making. So the thread of the entire story is in this little journal. From this diary, we go to this book here. The cover of this book in the background has a page from the diary, and you can see hats here, and on the back is the back of the diary itself. So the little diary and the story that I wrote are very much interwoven together in the history of Illinois and Missouri, and very much history in Oklahoma.
Wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now related to the book?
I published the book in September 2020, and now what I'm doing is meeting with various groups in Zoom meetings to explain the book to groups. I've met with a local genealogy group here, and they are very interested in how I have woven the factual history that I have just explained to you into the story that takes this through the three different states. I am also presenting to various book clubs. I've actually done 2 of those this week. And I am in touch with the 1904 World's Fair Society in St. Louis, and will be making a presentation to this group in January of 2021.
Wonderful. So no shortage of activities going on to get the book out into the world. So speaking of getting the book out into the world, where can people buy it?
People can find this book on Amazon. They can also find it at bookshop.com, and you can have your local bookstore order it for you. And I'm hoping that Muskogee Library will get a couple of copies there, which they can lend out also.
And actually, I believe it's bookshop.org. We always think of .com, but yeah, that one's actually .org. And I also think there was somebody else you wanted to give a shout out to before we wrap things up at the library.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Jeremy Jones. He's the one who's put this holiday program together to introduce new authors. And it's a wonderful program that he has set up here. And I want to thank him very much for that.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Muskogee Library. And everyone, please check out The Bonnet Book by Nancy Manise Hardesty.